morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah's Kesubos, Perek Test, Chapter 9, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. Okay, so as we have learned previously, although a woman's maluk properties belong to her, meaning what she brings into the marriage, what she inherits, what she brings into the marriage, she owns the actual property. Those are called the nichsei maluk. Her husband has rights to the property. He may eat their produce. He can stop her from selling them or giving them away. And when she dies, he inherits them together with the rest of her property. That's what we learned until now, right? That's the law of nichsei maluk. Nichsei maluk means that the properties that she owns, that she brings to the marriage, that she inherits during the marriage, she owns the property itself, but he has the peiros, that means the products, the usage. She may not give it away or sell it. As we learned previously, depending on what stage of the marriage it's at. And if she dies, he inherits her. And all these rights come into full swing after the nesuah and after the completion of the marriage, after the chuppah. Okay, so now the case of our Mishnah is the following. HaKaisev li'ishtoi, one who writes to his wife. And he can write it, he can say it, doesn't have to be written, he could say it too. Dinu dvarim, ein li b'nachasayach. Literally translated, it means, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your properties. That means a way of saying that I don't have any claims on I don't have any claim on your properties. Okay, that's the wording he says. That's how we'll translate it loosely. Dino dvarim literally means I have no claim or argument, ainly I don't have in your property. So he's saying I don't have any claims on your property. Okay, so it sounds like what he's saying is that this property that was brought into the marriage, that typically I would have rights to them, he's saying, no, I have nothing to do with it. Or he says, I don't have any claim, I have no claim or argument on your properties. What's the final halacha? Hareza eicha peres b'chayeha. He will still actually eat the produce during her lifetime. V'imei sayarsha. And if she dies, he inherits her, which is the regular laws of the nichsei maluk, of the property she brings in. Imkain, if so, asked the Mishna, lama kasavla, what was the point of writing to her? Dinu dvarim ein li b'nachasayach. That claim or argument I don't have in your property. Like, what did he say it for? Was he saying it just it meant nothing? Because practically speaking, the fruits are his, the land is his if she dies, which is always that way. The answer is Shemach Ravinasna Kayim. But by saying this, what he has accomplished is that were she to sell it or give it away, the sale would stand. We learned previously that if a woman inherits property after Nisuin and sells it, her husband can take it back from the buyer. That's what he can do. In our Mishnah's case, the husband gave up this right. That's the right that he gave up. When he said claim or argument I don't have on your property, he means this right of stopping her from selling it or giving it away. He is thus unable to seize her maluk properties from the buyer after she sold it. Furthermore, she's even permitted to sell it in the first place. Okay? That is what the Mishnah says he has accomplished now with this statement. Now, why does this statement only include this? When he says argument or claim I don't have on your property. So the only thing that affects, the Mishnah says, is his ability to stop her from selling it. But he still eats the produce, he still eats the fruits, he still inherits her. Why aren't those things included in his words? An explanation is like this. He said only, we have to examine his words. We got to take his words seriously. He said only that he was giving up his rights to her properties, which refers to the properties themselves, not to their produce. B'nachasayach, in your property, means in the actual property. The actual property is what he's focusing on. What comes out of the property? He didn't say anything about that. And therefore, he did not exclude himself from the peiros, from the fruits, from the profits. He also described them as your properties, which implies that he gave up his rights only as long as she owns them. Thus, he keeps his right to inherit them after she dies, and they are no longer hers. So he said, I don't have claim on your properties. That means the property itself, and when it's your property. When she's dead, it's not a property anymore. At that point, so that wasn't included in how he excluded himself. But he did exclude himself from the property itself. So what ramification does that have? That has a ramification, as the Mishnah says, of her ability to sell. If he says, I have no claim in your property itself, that means that in the property itself, she has full rights. And therefore, if she were to sell it, it would be a good sale. He couldn't take it back. He couldn't stop it in the first, and he can't stop it in the first place. Now, one last thing here before we move on, and that is something that the Bartanura points out, and that is that the case here is that he wrote this to his wife, which means he could have said it to her. All he did was say this, which means with his words, he basically, took off his rights. That only helps if he does that during the point of Erusin, meaning when there's just Erusin, the marriage has to completely be done, where now by getting married to her, we call it, he has the potential to these rights. So those potential to the rights, he can just say with words, I relinquish them. But if, let's say, we're talking about already after Nisuin, we're talking about after she's fully married. They're fully married. That means he has full rights. He basically has a partial ownership on the land. Then you can't just say, I have nothing to do with it. No such thing. You can't just say, I have nothing to do with it, and that takes off your rights. You'd have to actually go through a kinyan. You'd have to actually go through a legal transaction to actually remove his partial ownership from the properties, and then everything that the Mishnah says would apply. Okay, so that is the first case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah continues. Let's say he says, no claim or argument do I have in your properties and their produce. He spoke it out in this case. Says the Mishnah, he's not going to eat the fruits during her lifetime, because by mentioning the fruits explicitly in his relinquishment of the rights, so he now said straight out, I'm relinquishing my rights to the fruits. Okay, so what does remain with him? The Mesa Yarsha. If she dies, then he inherits her, because again, he said your property and your fruits. When she dies, it's not hers anymore, and therefore that he still held on to. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo oilam oichal peres, upei peres, at sheyichtav ladin udevarim eili ben chasach peresein ad oilam. Yehuda says like this: a person will always eat not only the fruits, but the fruits of the fruits, which we'll explain what that means soon, until he actually writes to her the following statement, or he makes the whole full statement. Dinu dvarim, claim an argument. Eili ben chasayach, I don't have in your property, ubeperesein, nor in their fruits, ubeperesein, nor in the fruits of their fruits, ad oilam, forever. If he says all that, right, that's a mouthful. If he says all that, then at the end, then he's actually relinquished everything, even the pei repairs. Now, what's pei repairs? What's fruits of the fruits? So explanation is like this. We just said before, if she goes ahead and let me read it to you here. This means that if she sells the produce, meaning he already said, what did he do? He relinquished the rights to the fruits. He said, no fruits. Okay, let's say that's all he said, which is the case here. That's all he said. Okay, this means that if she sells the produce and uses the money to buy land, that's what she did. Okay, now if she bought land, right, typically that would give him rights to the fruits of that land. He has the right to the produce of the new land. So the original land fruit that he said, I don't have anything with that fruit. Okay, he relinquishes rights to that fruit. But if she takes the fruit, buys another piece of land, and that land produces fruit, he never relinquished that, says Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore he'll get that. And not only that, if let's say he goes ahead and he says, okay, I relinquished the fruits of the fruits. All right, so the fruits of the fruits, what does she do now with the fruits of the fruits, the second generation fruits? She buys a piece of land. And there are fruits that grow from that land. He never relinquished that. He'll get them. Until he says the words, the fruits and the fruits of their fruits forever. He will relinquish only what he says specifically. And that's the point, Rabbi Yehuda. According to the Tanna Kama, according to the first opinion, you say fruits, you relinquish your rights for fruits, it includes all fruits forever. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't. And therefore, until he actually says specifically the fruits of the fruits forever, only then will he have no rights to any fruits along the line. All right. Now, Kasavla, Dinu Dvarim Ein Li Minachasayach. I have no argument or claim in your properties. Ubepei Seyad, and in their fruits. Ubepei Seyad, and the fruits of their fruits. And let's include the words forever. B'chayayach v'maisayach, in your lifetime and in your death. Okay? He just covered everything here. Right? He covered everything. Eino eicha peres b'chayeha, he doesn't eat the fruits during her lifetime. V'meisei yarsha. And if he dies, she doesn't inherit her. Because he said, I don't have anything in your fruits or your properties, even when you die. That means he's saying, I'm relinquishing all rights, including my rights of inheritance. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, nope, Imeisa Yershena. Even if he says, I don't have rights in your properties or fruits after you die, if she dies, he still inherits her. Why? Because if you try to say that you're not going to inherit your wife, you have now stipulated something that the Torah has written. And anyone who makes a stipulation about what's written in the Torah, Tanoi Batal, his stipulation is null. That means, according to Rabbi Gamliel, the husband's right to inherit his wife is based on words of the Torah. It's a deraisa, it's a din of the Torah that a husband inherits his wife. And if so, you can't just say, no, I'm not. You can't just do that. You can't just say, I don't inherit it. You can't give up. You can't make stipulations on what the Torah says. You said Torah says inherit. He says, no, I'm not going to inherit. You can't do that. And therefore, according to Shimon ben Gamliel, you can't, not even if he says, basically, I'm not going to inherit, he still inherits her. According to the first opinion says, you know why this is not stipulating about what the Torah said? Because it's not a deraisa. It's not a Torah law. Even though the Gemara gives a source for it, it's really under abundance, it's really rabbinic law for a husband to inherit his wife. There's a certain support to what the Rabbanan enacted based on the words of the Torah, but it's not a deraisa. That's not a law of the Torah. And therefore, the first opinion says you can make stipulations about it. You can make stipulations on a rabbinic law. And therefore, the Tanna Kama says that even if he says I relinquish my rights of inheritance, he doesn't inherit. So who's the halacha like? Shimon Gamliel or the Tanna Kama? So the Bartanura says very interestingly that the halacha is like Shimon Gamliel, that even if he says I give up my rights for everything that you have, even in your death, the halacha is that he will still inherit her, but not because of Shimon Gamliel's reason. Shimon Gamliel said it's a deraisa, and we don't hold like that. We hold it's a derabanan. However, the Bartanura says there are certain times that the Rabbanan gave Torah strength to rabbinic law. In order to strengthen the rabbinic law, they said we got to treat it like a Torah law. And therefore, in this case, we say, although inheriting one's wife is a rabbinic law, not a Torah law, it's a rabbinic law, but this law, the rabbis wanted to strengthen it like a Torah law, which means we have to treat it like a Torah law, and therefore, even though it's rabbinic, and typically he could say, I relinquished that right, in this case, they said, you got to treat it like a Torah law, and therefore you cannot relinquish that right. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.